Hey, come here. Listen, what I'm about to show you is top secret. It's just between you and me. Dell doesn't even want you to know this thing exists. If you look in the deepest, darkest areas of Dell's websites, even then, you won't find this unless you know exactly what you're looking for and you know exactly where to look for it. Which I do, which is why I have this one right here. This is the Dell Inspiron 15 5000 series, except this little puppy has a Ryzen 7 4700U, 8 cores, 8 threads, mated with 16 gigs of DDR4 RAM running at 3200 MHz. This might be the best value for money you can get for $900. But I think we'll be the judge of that, won't we? Let's get started. Okay, so let's get started. Now, trying to be one of the best value devices in this segment is a pretty bold and commendable aim. So let's see if this holds up to that. First off, we start with the look and feel of the device. Now, it actually looks really nice. It's all plastic all around. It might look a little metallic, but that's just the finish. It's just simple, clean plastic. It's got this bluish gunmetal finish with just a Dell symbol embossed at the top right there, as if to tell your workers, you're here for business. You're not here to mess around, and they better not mess around with you either. You're here to get the job done. And once you're done telling them all of that, you can flip the device over and you can see that there's a few vents at the back. One large vent at the very rear is for the cooling, and if you squint really hard, you can probably see the fans and the cooling solution in there, but it's got 4 rubber feet to lift it off the ground just that little bit. But what's interesting over here is not this little vent over here, but it's these 2 vents over here that are actually the speaker grills. That's right, this has down-firing speakers, something that I am never a fan of, but I did notice one interesting design feature. If you look very closely to the sides over there, it's not just one straight line, it actually curves off towards the lid a little. And I'd like to believe that this is a bit of an intentional design feature intended to allow the speakers to throw sound out the sides rather than just whacking it down into your table straight down. Now on the sides of the device, we have a modest set of I/O ports. You've got a little charging port at the edge over there, and there's actually a little white LED to tell you that it's charging. It's a nice little touch. Full-size HDMI, 2 USB Type A ports and 1 USB Type C ports, all of which are USB 3.2. And finally, we have a headphone jack and a little micro SD card slot over there. But this was a little puzzling to me because if you're using a camera and you're trying to transfer things from your camera to your laptop, then a full-size SD card is what you're going to be using. So a micro SD doesn't really come in clutch over there. Where it is useful is if you want to move data from your cell phone to your laptop or from your GoPro. Still a puzzling decision. I don't know why they didn't just put the full-size SD card reader, but still having a micro SD card reader is probably better than nothing and possibly useful for some of you out there. And that's pretty much it as far as port selection goes. The back is covered by a whole bunch of screws which you can remove, and you can actually replace the RAM and the SSD at least in there. So definitely a little bit of upgradability should you choose it. I'd also like to talk about the hinge of the device. It's actually really cool. It's in a different material. It's like a molded silicon/rubber material that is in the same color, but it's matte, so it contrasts a little bit with the rest of the device, but it looks really nice. But when you open it up, it actually serves to lift the back of the device off the table just a little bit so as to give a little space for that cooling solution. It's a nice little touch that also raises the back of the keyboard a bit, making it just a little bit more comfortable for you to type. Now, if we open up the device, we see that it's got a nice little screen with very thin bezels, a little camera on top. Now, the webcam is only 720p and 30 FPS. It's nothing to write home about. It's not even a Windows Hello webcam, but it does have 2 mics on either side of it. And the reason it's not Windows Hello is because there's a fingerprint sensor on the keyboard, on the top right hand side of the keyboard right over here. In my usage, I found the fingerprint sensor to be very reliable and very quick, so that's definitely a nice touch. It also doubles up as the power button. Now, the keyboard itself is something that's worth talking about because, well, it's a chiclet style keyboard, right? But I found the key travel to be sufficient enough to be comfortable. And at first I thought that the keys would be a little too small, but quite honestly, after like a minute of usage, I just got used to it so fast. It's actually a pretty decent keyboard. But Here's where some of the quirks of this device show up, some of the design choices, if you will. It's a full-size keyboard with a numpad on the side, which means there's no space for a speaker grill if you still want this to be a compact device, which obviously Dell was going for. The keyboard is backlit with white LEDs, but there are only 3 backlight levels, so it's not very customizable. It's either off, medium, or high. In my usage, I found even the high to be just at the right level that in broad daylight, you can still sort of make it out on this color scheme of device, but at night, it isn't absolutely burning your eyes with the anger of 1,000 suns. So yes, it's not customizable, but they seem to have found a level of brightness that works both in day and night, so that's pretty good. Another little quirk is on the right hand side, you see, instead of having a numlock at the top, they actually have this little button over here, which is actually a dedicated calculator button. That's right, one touch directly into the calculator. If that doesn't tell you who this device is aimed at, I really don't know what will. Frankly, it's pretty useful. I kind of like having the numpad on the right. I kind of like having a dedicated calculator button because you never know when you might want to split the bill with someone at a restaurant and you're carrying your device for some godforsaken reason because you don't know how to behave on a date. That's a thing. This is for you guys. Another interesting feature of the keyboard is this section over here. So I don't know about you guys, but generally Control, Alt, and Windows keys on the left hand side are what I used mostly. The ones on the right I completely ignore. And it looks like Dell knows this because they've just left the Alt and the Control on the right hand side, but instead of the rest of the keys, they've got these arrow keys and a page up and page down button right next to the arrow keys. So I think this is really useful if you're browsing long emails, Word documents, Excel files, all of that, and it shows you that Dell has actually put a fair bit of thought into this keyboard layout, and kudos to them for that little touch. You have a bunch of stickers over here and you've got a nice big trackpad that's smooth, it's reasonably precise, honestly quite a treat to use. It is offset to the left a little, but in my usage both in gaming as well as word processing and all that, the mistouch prevention, the palm rejection works really well. All around nice trackpad, really nice keyboard for this form factor. Pretty impressed so far. That brings us to the screen itself. Now, here's the thing about the screen. It's not the brightest screen in the world. At its max brightness, it might be okay for indoor viewing, but if you're out at the park, you might want to consider sitting under a tree, for example. As for color accuracy, out of the box, it was far from color accurate. It was definitely warmer than it should have been. Basically, even after calibrating it in Windows and with the Ryzen software that comes with it, it's not the most color accurate. So I would not recommend it for anyone doing Photoshop or video editing work if you require color accuracy. It is, however, perfectly fine for multimedia consumption, so you can watch Netflix or your favorite YouTuber on YouTube. Duh! Accompanying that screen is a pair of speakers that we spoke about earlier, the down-firing ones. Quite honestly, they're not that bad. They're not the loudest speakers in the world, but it does come with a Max Audio app that allows you to boost the speakers, wherein it does get loud enough, but at the cost of clarity a little bit. It's honestly not too bad. As a general media consumption device, it's pretty okay. It's a 1080p Full HD 60Hz screen, no high refresh rate, no shenanigans like that. It's all about the battery life. And the battery life is actually quite nice. In my usage, I let it run YouTube videos one after the other for hours and hours on end. Screen was at max brightness and the speakers were at half volume. And quite frankly, it gave me a little over 6 hours of continuous battery life. If you're making less demands of the laptop, then it should give you a better battery life all around. Which brings us finally to the actual performance of the device. So first of all, things that eat into the performance like bloatware and adware are not there in huge amounts. There is a little bit. Like McAfee seems to have found their way into this laptop as well. I don't know what they do and how they do this, but they seem to be finding their way into every Windows laptop out there. This one's no exception. You do get some notifications for McAfee and some prompts for you to buy it. You can ignore them though. It also comes with Dell's suite of software, and it's just a small bunch of software that allows you to contact support and look up the device manuals and such, and also some that allow you to set the display at different modes, cinema mode, animation mode and all that. Personally, I'd rather calibrate it the best I can and just leave it there. But if you want, you can fiddle around with that. The Ryzen software that comes with it is actually pretty interesting. It gives you some options to tweak the iGPU, but in my experience, it didn't make too much of a difference. There were a couple of things that made a difference, but it only made performance worse because you're basically asking too much of a mobile GPU. So how did it do when it came to gaming? Oh, I played 3 games, right? I started off with Doom Eternal and I set it at 720p low settings, and at those settings, it gave me a very respectable 55 frames per second average. Very playable indeed, but only at 720p low settings. The moment you go to 1080p, it's still playable at 30 plus frames per second. That's you may as well have an old PS4 or something for that sort of performance. I then played Apex Legends, and Apex Legends, being a very GPU intensive game, was completely unplayable. If you've got anything GPU intensive, then you can pretty much forget about it. This thing's not going to handle it. But games like CSGO, games like Valorant, for example, that are not so heavy on the GPU and are made to be playable on various types of hardware, they run pretty well. At 1080p, this thing was able to run Valorant at 65 frames per second average, and if you drop that down to 720p, you'll get an easy 80 to 95 frames per second, so quite playable actually. Quite frankly, onboard graphics have come a very long way. I believe this is the Vega 7 or 8 graphics that is included in this. Not the best in the market right now, but honestly very capable for light gaming even at 60 frames per second. So if you're a casual offline gamer, that's fine. If you're looking at high refresh rates, that's not going to be the best thing. And it's because that GPU is a little bit on the weak side and the screen is definitely not color calibrated and is not color accurate. I would just not be able to recommend this for that kind of work. You know, if you're doing photography or if you're doing videography and you need really color calibrated results, the screen's going to let you down. Even if you attach an external monitor, the GPU is probably going to handicap you to some extent or the other. On the flip side though, that processor, the Ryzen 7 4700U, in benchmarks, honestly, single core performance was only about 10% behind my desktop Ryzen 5 3600, and multi-core performance maybe 20 to 25% behind it. Even so, in this form factor, that is an incredibly impressive result. Any CPU related task, this thing is going to breeze through. So to recap it all, you get a device that's sleek, really good looking, thin and light, built pretty well. There's a little bit of chassis flex, but it's built pretty well overall. It's got this nice screen with the thin bezels. You've got a really nice keyboard with a well thought out layout and a very usable trackpad, combined with a solid Ryzen 7 4700U for proper productivity and multitasking, and a reasonably capable mobile GPU for that light gaming after you're done with all that work. All of this is for $900, which makes this probably the best value for money thin and light laptop that I have seen in the market, and I've gone and done a fair bit of research. The only thing that comes close is probably the Asus TUF series, but that's definitely a more gamer aesthetic. That's not as thin and light. That's a little more gamer aesthetic. You do get a lot of bang for buck with those devices, but you don't get this look and feel either. So it's up to you what you prefer. I'll leave a link down below to the Amazon listing so you can go check it out yourself and maybe buy yourself one, and then tell me what you thought about it. That's been it for today. We'll see you in the next one. Stay happy, stay peaceful, stay colorful.